Te voy a pasar. All right, good late morning, everyone, and welcome to our event, Ukrainian Veterans Pathways to Healing and Reintegration. Basically, this is first time actually in when this topic is really discussed in Brussels, and basically the main idea is that, or the consideration is that while the war in Ukraine is going very actively, there will be a future and there will be a day after in which the whole Ukrainian society will be challenged with the change. And one of the biggest aspects of that change is the return of the soldiers, the Ukrainian and then veterans, back from the front to the society as such. But let's jump to the debate, and for the introduction I give immediately the floor, as we already streamlining the event. I give the floor to Antonio Lopez Isturiz, who is our Secretary Treasurer of Martin Center, a member of the Parliament, a very senior one, and who will lead us to the topic. So, Tono, welcome.
Thank you, Tommy. Senior because of my years of service, not because of my age.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I would like, first of all, dear Rijo Terras, as Vice Chair of the APP Group, thank you for being here, and also for the panelists. I will say a few words about them at the end of my intervention. We're talking here today, and I think it's a good thing that we are starting to think about the post-war situation. We don't know when this is going to be over. Experts tell me in 2 weeks, 2 years, 2 months. We all pray and hope that this nightmare will be over soon, and Ukrainians first. They're always telling me that there are signs of weaknesses in the Russian armed forces, economy, blah, blah, blah. But, it's a tough opponent, as you well know from, unfortunately, your experience. Us, apart from helping, I've said many times, I think that when the vicious and declared war by Putin's Russia against Ukraine appeared, it was this European society the first to react. I remember politicians like Macron trying to deal with Putin in that, you will remember that photograph in the large table. By the way, as an anecdote, the table is Spanish, coming from Valencia, these large tables. While this was going on, European societies reacted. And I have to tell the example of my own country, Spain, that is very far away from the front. But even today, 3-4 years after, no one in the Spanish society, not a political party, questions the support for Ukraine. And of that, I'm very proud. Apart from few crazy, people that are paid by we all know whom, the whole Spanish society does not question at all the help, and also the future reconstruction. And the future reconstruction of Ukraine, and of course the inevitable membership of the European Union that will come in due time with all guarantees, this means that we have to seriously, and again, thank you to them, Tommy, and to the organizers, that we are already talking about this. Reconstruction is about, the first thing that comes to our mind is reconstruction of hospitals, of train, railways, of whatever. But reconstruction is also about people. And the Ukrainian society has suffered like no one during the last 4 years. There are a lot of psychological human sufferance that will take years, decades to overcome, huh? Because of what's happening. Uh, and then, in this particular case today, we are speaking about veterans. I am half American. We just, by the way, came from a successful meeting of Martin Center to Washington and New York, and it always calls my attention, no, the respect for the veterans in the United States that unfortunately we don't have in Europe. That's because, after the Second World War, we decided to go another path. And we have been now for 60 or 70 years without wars. Also, that tells you that European and Ukrainian people, please forgive us, please be patient. Europeans have to adapt to these new realities. We have been living too many years in this bubble of peace and prosperity. The Balkans war did not affect us so much. And now the first invasion of Crimea and so on, no one noticed, the one of Georgia, but finally the invasion of Ukraine, finally the European society woke up. We're slow, we know, but we can be effective. So taking care of the veterans in the future, it's a must. It's not an obligation. It's something that as Europeans, it plays also in our favor. These people are our veterans that have been in the front line, defending not only Ukraine, but also us. So I don't think that there will be any questions in European societies. There are questions about the money, about the military, maybe after the war if there are going to be troops on the ground or not, European, blah blah blah. But I don't think that the veterans should be, a question of discussion. This is something that we have to take care of, because you cannot leave veterans there, without a future, a hope, not only in Ukraine, but also in the European Union. As at the same time we sanction justifiably military from Russia, because of the actions they are taking and the unjustifiable invasion and so on, at the same time we have to take care of the veterans that are fighting for us. So I think that this is very reasonable. It is also a European thing, and so I very much compliment the opportunity of already here in Brussels with experts, not me, but experts on the ground. They will tell us their experiences, their what they are living, and after the Balkan War, so-called Balkan War, whatever you want to call it, there were many veterans, many weapons circulating throughout Europe, and many of them that they were not taking off, they took very, let's say, other paths. I remember in Spain there was much discussion because there were many, Albanian Kosovars and so on coming from the war, that they were now part of the gangs in Europe, and after the war they were left without anything to do, This is something that cannot happen. For today's discussion, we have, of course, as I said, the vice president of our group, Rijo Terras, with military experience and a renowned work in the parliament on security and defense. That is reminding us in the group, in the EPP group, that we always have to be ready for whatever it comes, and calling our attention, specifically more MEPs that we come from distance, from the front, about the realities there. We have Jan Jeven, who will present a personal testimony of thousands of Ukrainian veterans whose experience has to guide our decisions. We have Nedzad Novalikt with, as I mentioned, the lessons learned from the Balkans and the post-war situation that was created reconciliation and reintegration require patience, leadership. This is something that in Europe we don't have so much these days. Waiting for that leadership to come, to take the decisions, that courageous decisions that have to be taken, like I mentioned, the membership of Ukraine for the European Union. This is leadership. And a message for the rest of the world, not only about Ukraine, but as us Europeans. And Tommy, that you will moderate, and thank you again for bringing together this panel. One final reflection. The courage of Ukrainian soldiers has inspired Europe throughout these difficult years. Our responsibility now is to ensure that their courage is matched by our commitment. Commitment to rebuilding, commitment to healing, commitment to reintegration, and commitment to a Europe that never forgets those who defended our shared freedom. Again, the American example. I don't know if many of you have taken American airlines. You always see that before business class, before economy class, and so on, it's veterans. They are called first to go into the plane in the United States. Even in our countries, these American airlines always put veterans first. These are the, maybe one could say, small details, but that make a difference, because that remembers the rest of the importance of taking care of our veterans. Let's start to think also about ideas. How can we in Europe improve the life of veterans, and that they feel also recognized through these, maybe someone would call little details, but I think that they're a great recognition from our behalf for them. Thank you very much. I stop here. Now you are the one guiding the panel. Thank you very much, Tommy. Thank you for all of you to be here.
Yeah. Thank you, Tono, and thank you for your words. So how shall we play it now? First of all, as said in the beginning, this is not normally the discussions are very active discussions, very specific policy proposals. But the meaning of this discussion, first of all, we have a little bit more time than normally, and the idea is really to understand and get the human element, to understand what is happening and for the people, and how it has impacted the war in their life, and especially the veterans. So I'm going to, first start with Jan, then Mr. Novalic, because we have, as Tono mentioned, we have a European experience. A couple of decades ago, we have societies who have lived the reconciliation and still living that reality. So, do's and don'ts, and what that European experience would indicate what the Ukraine will go through. And then, as Tono mentioned, Mr. Terras, to see, to reflect on what this all then means for the European Union, and also, strategically for the future. We had the intention to have Jan here, and actually until last week the Minister of Defense of Ukraine said, "Don't you worry, he's able to come." But then things are during the war times are not so easy. So, but luckily we have Jan here with us in the big screen. You see Jan yourself, but we see you, and the connection is good. So what I have asked Jan to a little bit, to put more on the personal side, to start with how when the war started, what it meant for him. Then, engaging in front, just to mention that Jan is also, kind of one of the voices in Ukraine who are speaking already about these things. And as maybe Jan will mention also, his wife was in the war front and has shared the same experience. And then late in third part, Jan, maybe we could elaborate how you see the future, not only for yourself, but your fellow veteran, your brothers and sisters in arms, and how do you see the future? So, Jan, floor is yours, and welcome from Ukraine.
Hello, thank you for your invitation. It's an honor for me to take part in this meeting. So about the future for the veterans of the armed forces that I can see, a lot of people going to have a very big experience in working with different types of drones, with different types of UGVs. A lot of people already who's out of the army by different reasons starting their own veteran businesses. We have a lot of companies who started making UGVs. Who doesn't know what's an UGV? That's unmanned ground vehicle. We use them for different types of the missions and operations. That's for the logistic operations. They bring food, ammo, water to the front line, ammunition, and other stuff. That's the evac drones, as you can see from the, for example, first separate medical battalion. They have successful missions with evacuation of a wounded soldier for very deep front lines. They don't put risk of people to the risk of the lives of the people to the mission. They use only the machine. We have combat vehicles who can participate or take part in the operation. The same stuff happens with the development of the drones. We have different types of drones that are made by the veterans and are active right now at the front line. We use them as for the engagement and again as for the logistics engagement for the short distances, a couple kilometers. Also, you can see our results on working on the deep distances, working in a deep territory of the enemy. Engaging the fuel stations, and etc. So, as I said, for the veterans, they will have a big future, but we need to create it for them and provide that future for them because after the war going to end, not the veterans going to be getting used to civilian lives. That's the civilians who needs to get used to the veterans, to the people who have seen the horrors of the war, who have lost something, and they're still moving on in this life.
Okay, Jan, as a follow-up, how do you, because there's a lot of discussion about the sociological, no, social psychological state of Ukrainians. There's even estimation that 70% of the population is is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So how do you see that? For example, in your case, if you think about yourself, maybe your wife, how and your fellow veterans, how easy psychologically, because you have the technical side and the infrastructure and the opportunities, but psychologically, how do you see that? Many, because the war is now has been going on 4.5 years, and so that's a big chunk of and time for humans' life. So how do you see that part, and what kind of challenges it will set?
Thank you for the question because it's a very hard question. It's going to be for our government and our people in the future. People 100% that they will need the psychological help as they can say, no, I'm feeling good. But from my own experience, I know that you're not going to feel good after you're out from the army and you're trying to adapt to the civilian life. Just for example, if you're going to just take one infantryman from an infantry brigade who have spent it more than 90 days at the position, all of that time he was engaged by enemy fire. He was attacked by FPVs. He was attacked by UGVs. He was attacked by the artillery, and enemy assault groups tried to take over his position. That's the person who saw death. He barely survived himself. He spent all of that time just in a trench or in a foxhole. 100% they're going to need psychological help after the war because we all know the experience of all the wars that happened before, what were happening to the people after the war who didn't get the help. They started to organize criminal groups. They were addicted to alcohol. They were addicted to drugs. That's a main problem of veterans all over the world. We can see it even in the civilized countries, big countries, even the US, for example. There's a lot of people, veterans, who are right now on the streets and they don't get enough of supports. But still, we're working on that, and we will need help of our partners in the future with rehabilitation centers, with help, the psychological help inside of the Ukraine. Sorry. inside of the Ukraine and outside of the Ukraine itself.
Right. Thank you, and we will come, back to you in the later part when we have questions and answers. Mr. Novalic. So as mentioned, we have European, experience, and so how do when you looked and you mentioned now before this meeting that actually you're already in contact with Ukrainians, and so how do you see that? What Ukraine as a society is, in your view, is going to go through, and what would the Balkan experience the war, which was of course was very different and also in many ways, but what are the lessons, especially as we speak about veterans and the integration? How has that process developed in the region? Knowledge.
Well, hello to everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for bringing this important topic. And it's also for me very difficult to speak, to imagine what could happen in Ukraine while war is still ongoing. So it is difficult to speak about that, but it's also very important. From Balkan experience, I could say that we did actually very poor regarding war veterans and their integration. So main approach used to be when war actually ended that war veterans should stay silent, almost invisible, if that is impossible. So basic message from political elite, from society in general, used to be: you did what we asked from you, and please be quiet now, because we will continue on from this point. And actually that resulted in situation that most of our veterans felt abandoned, and actually some right-wing political parties, right-wing political movements saw that as opportunity, and they actually took kind of advantage in that situation. So they even more radicalized those war veterans. And of course, in Balkan situation, our experience, it is different than Ukrainians. We see some similarities, but we see many differences also. And the biggest lesson from our experience is actually that when we are speaking about reconstruction, you can reconstruct buildings, but when we are speaking about reconstruction in human lives, you need to accept that you cannot fix everything, and that is the biggest, the most difficult lessons which we learned. It took years, for us. On very personal level, I could speak from my family experience. My dad is war veterans. He participated in the war as combatant. It is so difficult that you accept at one point that you cannot fix everything. That you cannot rebuild life in way how it was before the war. Because at one point we had almost 1 million people who participated in the war, most of them very young, and most of them have been completely abandoned by society at the end of the war. State gave them some poor pensions, enough to survive, but not enough for normal lives. So they got somehow dependent on state and political elites, and many of them have been misused, and they are still misused by those political elites.
Yeah. And so what in essence, for of course we don't, as mentioned, we don't know when what the war will end, but what would be the basic, the core elements, looking the Balkan experience, when this reintegration and healing in Ukraine starts, what are the main elements in your view for the society, and especially as a government who is trying to implement policies?
I would say that basic human need is that they have some role in society, and most of war veterans, especially I could speak from Bosnia and Herzegovina experience, used to seek what is their role after war is finished. Uh, that war veteran identity is important for them, and years after the war is still very important for them. But most of them are seeking, what is their role, what would be their legacy at the end of their lives, and they are searching for opportunities how to contribute to their community, and the biggest lessons would be that we should provide them, these opportunities, that we should create those opportunities, how to include war veterans in post-war life. It is difficult, because also a reaction from civil society organizations used to be, oh no, we will not work with them. They participated in the war, they contributed to that war, so we are doing peace building and we will not work with them, so we will exclude them. Even some international institutions reacted in that way, so they participated in war, they contributed to the violence, so we will exclude them from all post-war processes. And that is the biggest lessons, if I could say, what some other society could take from the Balkans, that we need to create opportunities for war veterans that so they could contribute to their communities, to their societies after war ends. And that is actually really super important for them on personal level, because in that way they could create some other day identities. They will stay war veterans for the rest of their lives, but they could become peace builders, they could become community builders, they could do some work on very local level, which will give them sense, of purposes, sense of belongings to their communities.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, Mr. Terras. So you, as Tono mentioned and introduced, you are, before your career and a member of the European Parliament, you were and maybe still are professional soldiers. So listening, Jan, and our discussion, I think there's two aspects of it. First of all, of course, because us, the European society, should be, we may face such a situation in the near future, if because the possibility of war expanding is there. But on the other hand, how can that, and maybe the second part of the discussion is then how can we engage, how can we help Ukrainian society, what should we do? And then maybe the third part is then, because there's the active discussion, as Jan already mentioned, many, and also Mr. Novalic, there is, also professional, many veterans most likely will turn to opportunities which relates their activities during the war. So what kind of opportunities that could bring for Europe, who is honestly at the moment trying to, revamp its defense architecture, also including Ukraine. So Mr. Terras.
Thank you very much. I was very much afraid to come to this panel because, as we hear experts and experiences from the war, from small countries' perspective, and not knowing the atrocities of war to that extent, how can I advise on something? On the other hand, I think it is important to talk about the topic. I would start with one most important
um, most important thing which is needed, and my colleague here mentioned it also, we can talk about what happens after the peace only if it comes to the peace. And in my opinion, we are not supporting Ukraine today enough militarily. We pretend to support it, but we are not really taking it seriously. And that is because our nations, as Tono mentioned, have had too long time of peace dividends. I blame Francis Fukuyama for that, because an American philosopher who tells the people that there will be no wars anymore was wrong. He was wrong, but it was very easy for us to believe it because we wanted to believe it. On the other hand, everybody was surprised when the first Ukrainian Russian attack against Ukraine 2014 happened, even though it was after Georgia, where already Russia used conventional military means against the democratic country. And if we look at the 100 years of European history, then we have wars every 20 years. It is normal. Human behavior is wars. As long as the boys and girls in the courtyard fight each other, there will be wars. It is part of the history. And we had to accept it. But we did not. Then we tried to deal with it with outside European borders. Same time, we still had people who were killed, hundreds of thousands of people were killed in the middle of Europe. Now, our own Estonian experience is a very small scale, because Estonian soldiers have been participating in all the conflicts which have been in the last 20 years with a small scale. Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. We were in Bosnia, we were in Herzegovina, Kosovo, etc. It is not the war, and that is important to say. But people got killed there, people got injured there, so we had to deal with this issue in Estonia, even in a very small country. And in the small society, it is very different, because really everybody has something to do with it. And it was very difficult, even in the small country, in the small scale. We had introduced a veterans policy 15 years ago. I think the one thing which, even it sounds very political, I think for Ukraine and for European Union, we need to work out a veterans policy which is not just hot words, but it is covered, packed, a strategic pact with the finances. What are the groups we are working with, and what is our way of dealing with it? And that's not only soldiers. We have these groups of people who are affected. These are the wounded veterans. This is the most difficult group. You will not replace, you will not bring back your feet or your hands. Then the wounded veterans who are wounded in the head, who have PTSD. In Estonia, we found out this is the most difficult group, because Estonian man, I guess as Ukrainian man, do not want to recognize that it has a problem, that he has a problem. He would say, I'm tough, but on the other hand, he has real significant problems, and he drops these problems in the drinking alcohol and drugs, etc. To recognize that there's a problem is difficult for these soldiers. Then the soldiers' families come to it. They are all affected. And then the society as a whole, who is affected through the bombings, etc. So there are so many layers. How we can put it all together? And the only way is to see the veterans as a full-fledged part of society and have a strategic patience. I think strategic patience is very important, because the veterans will not accept, and they will be always unsatisfied. But you have to come back to it and say, now we are supporting it. And in Estonia, there was our business community who took the soldiers on board. And I think that is way where we can use the knowledge of Ukrainian soldiers from the front of the modern technological warfare and bring them on board, so they will feel themselves full members of the society by adding to our defense industry with the ideas, with their hands and heads, everything with they still have, so that they will feel they are worth of something. And then the veterans policy in Estonia also do had the same thing like the poppy culture in the UK, or the thank the veterans in US. We have also introduced a flower, a veterans month, where all society supports the veterans. They talk about it and they have celebrated as heroes. In the mindset, does the European Union do it? Probably is not possible. But every country itself can play with it. And Ukrainian soldiers need to be seen as our heroes, not only as Ukrainian heroes, because they are fighting for us. I think that is important. Kind of a policy which includes how we deal with it, how it is paid, who pays it, and how we put them back to the society after the war ends. I think one very good example is I can tell you, it's my good friend Prince Harry. Yeah, this is now very unpopular in UK and unpopular in America because of his wife, but he started a very important program which is called Invictus Games, and it is now still existing, and the Ukrainians participating there, etc. It is for the war veterans who are injured to have something to do with. I have, for example, one of my soldiers, 21 years old, who lost both legs above the knees. He is now number 6 in the world bicycle championships because he found something to deal with, to have a sport. He feels himself full-fledged member of the society, even without the legs. But that is only one single example. In Ukraine, you have thousands of these examples. And that is even, for me, unprecedented. So we have to look back to the history, how Germany managed it after the Second World War. They had the same problem. Look, we need to learn from the history also and try to find ways to deal with it. And I think the reconstruction of the country, and I have an idea, I don't know how I will feel it, that we have in place of these cities which are destroyed and bombed, we can build cities where the veterans, their families live together and have the kind of a medical and psychological care, like quarters of the cities where the veterans can deal with them together, have factories, have industry, business there, so they can bring something back, something to the society, so the society will pay them for their service. But it all is just ideas, because I am not here to advise anybody, because only the Ukrainians know how tough it will be, or the people in the Balkans who have seen the war and who have seen the atrocities. And the last point is how we'll take care of the children. I have met in Ukraine children who have only seen war. They have seen nothing else but only war since 2014. Soon they will be grown-ups. How they will deal with it, that is another topic we need to discuss. Thank you. Sorry for...
All right. Okay, good. Good. So now I will turn to audience before I have a couple of questions for Jan. But I was, floor is open. So you just raise your hand, and I will take your question. But while waiting somebody to break the ice, I will turn back to Jan. So expectations, because what Mr. Terras underlined, many policies, but how, for you, Jan, for example, what are the how do you and your colleagues or fellows, what expectations you have from the society, and how ready you feel that Ukrainian society is for that return? because obviously we see even trying to get the permission for you to come to Brussels. But it's very evident that what we have is, of course, we are not yet there. The war is ongoing, and that is the priority. And we don't, even though the narrative is that the situation is better than it's a year ago, still Ukrainian men are dying, still Kiev is being bombarded, and of course that is resisting, that is the priority. So, how do you see that? What are your expectations, and how easily you see that Ukrainian society and government and the system is going to respond to the post-war situation as it comes to veterans? Jan.
Thank you for the question. Physically, psychologically, possible people are ready for the end of the war, but still, Ukraine itself is not ready to the end with the resources and the help they can provide to the veterans. As it was mentioned before, the soldiers after the war, a lot of them going to feel themselves abandoned. Approximate number right now with the armed forces, the forces of defense of the Ukraine, is more than 1 million people. Small number of those people, hardened veterans, going to stay in the armed forces. They're going to become the backbone of the new Ukrainian army. A lot of people going to be discharged from the army, and they will try to find themselves in the civilian life. Personally, for myself, because of my health condition, I am also a disabled veteran. I've spent only 2 months at the civilian life, and I returned back to the army. I re-enlisted. Right now, I'm serving in the 24th Assault Regiment as a deputy of the battalion commander of one of the battalions inside of the regiment. Ukraine will need to do a lot of steps, and it will need the help of the partner nations to help with that. That's the organization of the working places for the veterans. As I said before, the number is approximately 1 million. Some percentage going to stay in the army, a lot of going to retire from the army. Those people are the working class. They know their job, they know what to do, they know how to do it, and they're specialized in their jobs, and some of them will have the possibility to return back to the civilian jobs. A lot of people going to need the psychological and the physical rehabilitation inside the Ukraine and outside of the Ukraine because of the numbers of the disabled people we have right now. Our facilities won't have the possibility to work with all of them at the same time. The financiation of the veteran business also is going to take a good part in the future of the Ukraine, because, as I said before, a lot of people are specialized in different jobs as UGVs and UAVs. Those are not the only stuff that the veterans going to do after the war. A lot of people going to start just simple businesses like coffee shops, repair shops, etc. The things that they are good at, and using the knowledge from the like civilian life and using the knowledge from the military life. For example, a person was a platoon commander, a company commander of the repairs company. All his service in the army, he was repairing armored vehicle. He can start his own business after the war as like a custom repair shop for the civilian vehicles or heavy truck duties, or etc. So, as I said, I don't know how it's going to sound in English. In Ukraine, it's going to be a grant. People who has ideas for the businesses, they just give the ideas to the public or to some kind of organization. They start financing the business, and they are like they need to create working spots for the Ukrainians, like to work inside. But also we need to include the moment a lot of soldiers who are fighting at the front line, they are not only the citizens of Ukraine. We have the foreign fighters in the international legions and other units who's also going to return back to their countries. Italy, France, United Kingdom, everywhere. You're everywhere going to see veterans of the Ukrainian war. And those people also will need help abroad in their own home countries with the help for the adaptation for the civilian life. Because the war that we have seen in the movies, the war that we have seen in the video games, even all the past wars that we have seen, it's nothing even close like to the war that's happening in the Ukraine. For my example, I participated in the defense of the Ukraine since 2016. If we're going to compare the scales, the technology, the tactics of the war that was far back in 2016 and what is happening right now, that's only 10 years apart. Believe me, that's a huge difference. Like, if we're going to compare what I saw in 2016 to what I see right now, it's like looking at a kindergarten.
Okay, many questions I have already, but we have already questions from audience. So lady there and then back and there. So let's see the questions and also maybe you can present yourself. You know, clear voice, so Jan can hear. It's audio is not maybe there so good as it's here, and then if you have specific questions for this one panelist, you can mention to whom you put the question. So floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm a journalist from Lithuania, Milda Vilikanskita. If I may, I will have a few questions. One is for Jan, other will be for the panelists. First of all, Jan, I want to thank you for your service and thank you to all men and women in uniform in Ukraine, Slava Ukraini. And I would like to ask a bit what Member of Parliament Riho Teres talked about families, because we know that, and you mentioned that not just veterans will have to adapt, but also society will have to adapt to veterans from the war. Maybe you already know some stories when soldiers comes wounded physically, wounded psychologically. They come back to their families, to their wives, husbands, children. How this life now looks like, and what help families gets already, and what help they need in the future. Thank you very much.
Right, we have quite still 40 minutes to go, so let's go directly to Jan, and then we go back to audience. Yeah, Jan, you want to reply?
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. From my own experience, even for me, it's very hard to find topics or like anything to have a chat with my civilian friends who are like still at the civilian life, or people who I met in civilian life. It's very hard like to find anything in common with those people, even just to talk. Right now we have a lot of veteran societies, even from the third Army Corps. They have created the Veteran Corps that helps veterans with adaptation to the civilian lives, with the business and other stuff. Some recommendations, really, it's very hard to say. Most of all, to the civilian people, it's not to annoy the veterans with the questions. How it was, did you kill people, have you seen something, when the war going to end, etc, etc, etc. Those questions that we don't have answer to, or we just don't want to reply, not to trigger the traumatic memories that we have.
Two questions, but okay, I just because to be honest, me personally, because I'm dealing with this and following this discussion. So how does it then? It's what you said, that you know, not having even topic to discuss with your civilian friends. So how does it? And you don't need to answer if you don't want to, or you can set the boundaries. How does it feel when you have been there in the front? You know, in a very extremely intensive conditions, and then come, of course, Kiev and also the civilians, so-called civilians in Ukraine, they are in the war. But how does it feel to be how that moment, how, and psychologically, how does that felt for you?
As I said, for me it was very hard. The adaptation for the civilian life, just even when the soldiers go out on the vacation, sometimes they try to isolate themselves, like going for a week to the Carpathian, to the isolated house, just to spend the time with their girlfriends, wife, like small numbers of the family, with like small numbers of the friends, just isolated from the people on their own, all by themselves, or like with somebody who can understand them or they trust.
Good. We had we take from back there. You know, maybe you can. You know, we have a microphone. Maybe we can come to microphone so Jan can hear also.
Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you to the Martin Center for organizing this, because I think, as somebody said at the beginning, I think it's so important that we don't stop talking about Ukraine, the war, after all these years. And then also, similar to you, thank you, Jan.
Can you just briefly introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Kirsten Dume. I'm a Senior Managing Director at FTI Consulting. And yeah, thank you, Jan, what you and your fellow companions do in Ukraine, for Ukraine, but also for the rest of Europe. So Slava Ukraini. So we are very engaged, and I lead for our company also our pro bono activities. And Ukraine is one of our focus areas. And we work pro bono for the Superhumans, which is an organization that have medical centers in Ukraine for war veterans, but also civilians that have been impacted by war, with prosthesis, with facial surgery, but also with psychological and mental help, to help integrate those people into society again. And my plea to everybody here, and my question to Jan is, how can we here do more things like that, to get involved more with pro bono work, which is, it's to help with raise funds, to support centers like that, to support activities on the ground. So if there's anything also, Jan, from your side, to tell us what is it that we from here can do more to help war veterans, civilians affected by the war, to integrate into life. So thank you very much.
I think that's also for Jan, but also for the rest of the panel on that. But let's take the third question, please.
Hello. It's maybe not question. It's more about some moment. Thank you very much, Tony, that you asked about what is exactly now in this moment. What is the situation? And Jan said that yes, it's too hard. I totally agree. I present myself. I'm Yulia Paskiewska, and I'm expert consul of Europe. I work directly with project with college rights of veterans and personnel of armed forces in Ukraine. And I am doctor in psychology. Just in 1 week ago, recognized by Belgium, official Belgium recognition. That's why I'm proud of this. That Ukrainian scientists also implemented our approach everywhere, and that's why I want to say thank you very much that you started to talk about this point about veterans, about psychosocial support, not only about democracy and other things. Yeah. So what in this moment we do, and really. We need at first. We need capacity of staff, because who can help and who can support veterans? We need this program. I am ready to do with you together all these programs, because really we haven't all capacity to training and to really find these specialists who are ready to do it. It's about capacity of medical staff who are give support, not only medical rehabilitation, but they are talking with people, veterans, which stay in medical institutions without legs, without eyes, and other things. It's also psychosocial interview and facilitated these veterans during this process. That's why we made training for this medical staff and give this knowledge about trauma-focused communication and skills, how to talk with veterans, because it's a lot of aggression, it's a lot of emotions. And what do you know what they say at first? If you come to veterans and start to talk, they say, you don't understand me. You don't know what is this. You are not here. You are with legs and eyes. I am without it. This is the first reaction, and this is normal reaction of veterans because they are in trauma, except that they haven't other things of their body. That's why we have to ready to talk, and that's why we have to training capacity of staffs who work with this. This is the first point. We need this one, and thank you very much that you ask what we need. The second point, what we need in social community. In social community, I understand not only like society, but also directly family and neighbors, because a family also has trauma and they don't know how to talk, how even to live together with veterans, how to support and help. They even don't have information in which institution they can lead these veterans and get support and get some even normal things. Yeah. So we provide also social information of family, of society about human rights of veterans, because nobody knows their human rights. They know how to fight, they know how to defend, but they don't know their rights in society. This is the second point what we need and have to do, and we have clarified these human rights. And with Minister of Defense, we did it, some of them, but it's not enough. We still have to do this, or maybe recommendation or some else. Like it have to be documented or some programs also, and after implemented. And also, what I want to say that. It's about real hub, because it's really not enough now this real hub to veteran. There they have to be like together peer-to-peer support. It's also very important building this peer-to-peer support, and it's very useful in this case. And but for this we needed special territory, special hub. We have some of them, but it's not everywhere. And you mentioned it's really Ukraine is very big country. That's why we need a lot of like this hub, not in Kiev, not in Lviv, for example. It's and also very important for my mind in. December, I was in Netherlands, and we work with veterans and Minister of Defense of Netherlands, and it was our some veterans of Ukraine who needed rehabilitation. So if they come a small group to Brussels or Belgium or somewhere and get some this rehabilitation, medical rehabilitation, I mean, it's also very useful because our medical staff is really haven't even possibility. They're really tired, and they also even not sleeping because they need to always work. That's why this is rehabilitation point is also important for us. This is what we have now to do, and maybe continue. I can also to be touch with you further with all of you and leader this process more and more and do really very important things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I turn to panel. Also, there were many points made. Also, proposals for the future, or what we could do. Would you like to some thoughts and comments, Mr. Novalic, Mr. Teras, you want to start? What comes to your,
I think, of course, the pro bono work is very much appreciated by everybody, and it shows that the people of the European countries want to support it. But I think the scale of the need in Ukraine is something where we need to allocate significant resources to help Ukraine to deal with the issue which we are talking about today. So pro bono is good, but it never will fill the gap if it's needed. And so I think we should have a European Union, I would say, Marshall Plan, which would include one side how to build up the economy of the country, but the other side how to build up the people, because they are all of them are injured from the war. Some of less, some directly, some indirectly, but everybody is. And therefore it is very, very important that we will have a European Union plan how to deal with it, which is financed within the next multi-annual financial framework. And if somebody would ask me where the money should come from, I can say perhaps our projects in Mali and Central African Republic, which have brought Russian influenced corrupt governments to the power, should not get that much money, and this money should go to Ukraine today to fight there with for the democracy. And one thing which I want also mention is that I think these veterans coming back from the war front lines are a very big asset fighting corruption in Ukraine. Because I think it will be very difficult for a policeman to ask for a bribe from the war veteran because he will probably kill him. And that I think is something which needs to be seen also positively, that these soldiers who have fought for their country, they don't accept corruption. I hope so, at least. There will be always corruption, but I hope it will be less. So I think the pro bono is good, but we need to have a fund specially allocated for Ukraine to rebuild Ukraine, and we need to do it not tomorrow. We need to do it yesterday. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, so kind of comment before giving word to Mr. Novalic. I think the political message what we are trying, what this event to say, is that first of all, a couple of points. First of all, of course, the war is going on, and but you have already noticed that there's discussion about ceasefire and all of that, and when it will happen, that we don't know, but when that happens, things will happen very, very quickly. So, you have the situation, especially concerning veterans, you have 100,000 of people, or these men there, and they will come 2-3 weeks, they come home, they are happy, there's, social interaction, etc. But immediately, very quickly, the question comes, what about future? Where do I stand? The whole healing process starts. And there is also, we are speaking now about the human aspect of it, but there is also a political aspect, that there will be a lot of things happening in Ukraine politically. They will go to have presidential elections, parliamentary elections. Veterans, as mentioned here, they will play a huge role. There will be a lot of ex-military who will go to politics. And third point, it's not, and it's not. It's a challenging moment for Ukraine, and we here in Brussels should not take it for granted that Ukrainian society then automatically inclines for European, for European Union, and unless we make it very clear and we're very engaged from the very beginning of this process. Now, as it comes to defense cooperation, all of that, military aid to Ukraine, or in which the Europe and European Union now is more and more stronger, but there's a certain controversial, there is a discussion about that. But as Mr. Teras mentioned about this, supporting civil society, supporting veterans, I think morally and humanly we can all agree on that. And so there is a strong case for us to be there from the very, 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 very beginning. So, Mr. Novalic.
Just few remarks. Actually, this war veteran experience is available and it could be used in different ways. I'm coming from a peace organization which is centered for non-violent action, and actually we recognize that this war veterans experience could be used for peace actions. From Balkan experience, we have many war veterans who are willing to commit the rest of their lives to peace because they witnessed what war really is. And Jan mentioned it's not like in movies or something like that. And they are willing to talk to younger generations, to youth, to people from other communities. They are willing to devote their lives to some actions could bring social cohesion, could prevent some social conflicts. And it's really important when that moment come in Ukraine or anywhere else that this war veteran experience could be used in different ways. The second point is actually when we are talking and trying to imagine this post-war situation, and I'm also talking from Balkan experience, we are doing that in a way that it will be a framework which could be named transition from point A to point B, from point war to point which we could define as peace. And we usually imagine that this process will last some certain amount of time, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and everything will be fixed. And that is not working in that way, because you need to deal with some things which could last for decades, you know. And also you need to be aware that you are working with humans, and that is not a mathematical process. It's not always 2 plus 2 4, you know. You need to take also that in consideration, some other factors in society which could oppose to your to that process, you know. Also from Balkan experience, we need to be aware that some war veterans would oppose to peace, any kind of peace. It's not only that they will oppose to peace which they define as unjust peace, you know, but they oppose to any type of peace, you know, because they are coming for them, you know, after 2, 3, 5 years, you know, war is something very normal. That is their normal war, and you need to deal with that. You need to understand also them. You need to include them in that process.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Novalic. Just to make the point, in fact, in Europe, we can see, but just to, as we do personal anecdotes, like my grandfather was in war 5 years, and still decades ago, the impact of that experience, resonates in my, in my family and family of many other families in European continent. But back to Jan, just for you, because Antonio Lopez Isturiz introduced Jan, but just for you to context mention that Jan, in fact, was a commander of the 1st Infantry Battalion of Ukrainian International Legion. So because Jan made the comment about that, and he was, in fact, from the very beginning there on 2022, including the Battle of Kiev, and already involved, just to put in the context. But Jan, I would turn to you. Maybe if you want to, comment on the question, what can be done, but also maybe I would, and so I take the liberty to make one question, because I know not only you, but your wife is very active on this debate. Is there a difference? And there has been many studies, for example, in the case of Israel or countries where women have participated in war action, and which is the case in Ukraine. You have quite big segment of women participating in front lines. So, from your personal point of view or personal experience, is there a big difference between men and women when they return from the front, from front? How is that dynamics different, or is it very similar? Is there something additional?
That was a good question, because women in the army, they face a lot of, let's call it hate, a lot of hate. Not all people believe that women, like, we have young girls, like, let's say 18, 19 years old, already fighting at the front line as drone operators, as snipers, as combat medics in infantry units. A lot of people don't want to believe that. They don't want to see them in the army, and they face a lot of hate because of that. And it's only one good point if we're going to compare men and women. Women are more open after their return for the different types of the rehabilitation. For example, the same psychological rehabilitation as before was mentioned. A lot of men, they think it's not manly enough to go to to get some psychological help. I need to be tough. I need to be big. I need to be a man, etc., etc., etc. So, for the question of women in the army and the life after the actual combats, women are more open for the help.
Right.
And
Thank.
if you won't mind for the previous question
Yeah.
about what type of the help, how can they support us? For example, this was mentioned, Superhumans Rehabilitation Center. Also, that's one of the biggest facilities in Ukraine. The second one, if I don't know which of those is the first number, it's the Unbroken. Both of those facilities host a lot of injured veterans and civilian people who were injured because of the Russian aggression. They help with the psychological rehabilitation. They help with the physical rehabilitation. They help with the prosthetic and other stuff. But still, the facilities, if we're going to compare them in scales to Ukraine, they are big, but still not big enough to host all of the people that really need that help. So volunteer doctors from the abroad who can come to Ukraine and work here in those centers that would help us, donations or partners who can make those facilities even bigger than we have, because in the future they're not going to host only the Ukrainian veterans. Possible they're going to host veterans from all over the world. And again, the opening of the facilities abroad, like in other countries, that would also help with the deployment, or not deployment, sending people for the healthcare abroad to other countries. Even for the time while the war is going on, it will be more safe and more great for them.
Thank you. We still have a couple of minutes. If there's a question, okay. Yeah, well, can we? Well, okay, you and then you.
Yeah, thank you. My next question, as I mentioned, for the panelists, and maybe it's not so much about veterans, but about what will be after the war ends, because now we talk that Europe finally woke up, supports Ukraine, maybe not enough, but maybe not enough pressures Russia. We see that some businesses went to economy forum in St. Petersburg because they say that they don't want to burn bridges with Russia. We see Italy, France, Greece giving tourist visas for Russians, and they don't want to ban Russian combatants to come to Europe. So would you say that it is possible that when the war ends, I don't know, in a month, half a year, we will come back to business as usual with Russia, and Ukrainian veterans will have to be at the same beach with Russians? Thank you.
Good. Let's take the.
Thank you very much to our panelists. My name is Derval O'Callaghan. I work for the European Peacebuilding Liaison Office, which is a network of peacebuilding organisations working to prevent violent conflict around the world. My question is a bit on Mr. Terrace's remarks on the need for strategic patience for these issues. So what we have learned over many decades of conflict, and in terms of supporting countries that are emerging from conflict, is that over time, often the support diminishes because we look at other priorities. We look at countries that are in active conflict, and it's much harder to keep the attention, to keep the support and partnership needed to support long-term reconciliation, reconstruction, rebuilding the social fabric. I mean, Mr. Terrace, you almost alluded to yourself by saying, well, we should take money from Central African Republic or from Mali. So looking long-term, how do we look at when the point will come potentially post-war where we look at Ukraine and say, actually, there's somewhere else we need to put that money on an emerging conflict? I mean, we can see it even now in terms of political attention. The Middle East flares up, Ukraine is less on the agenda. These things come in waves. And maybe then my question is to Mr. Novalic, if you can share a bit of your experience in the Balkans of
how you have tried to keep up that level of support that has been needed to keep these processes going, as you said, over decades. Thank you.
All right, I think that played well. So there's two questions. It was very political questions. So as you are the politician in the panel, I'll give about the pitch, the same pitch question, and then the peace building, and then as a follow up for Mr. Novalic. But we start with Mr. Teras. So please, floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I'm feeling this was the same question actually. The business as usual is the moment where we need to turn the funds somewhere else. But first of all, I would like to see that not happening. But I am absolutely convinced that as soon as I will even not say the peace in Ukraine, but as soon as the active war fighting stops, there will be enormous amount of people who want to go back to business as usual with Russia, because they are still there. They are not somewhere disappeared. In Germany, you have voices every day who say that we need to start to use the Nord Stream 2, etc., to come to the business as usual. That's because European citizens are not willing to give up their comfort. They have to kind of. I even a couple of years ago calculated that every European citizen gives away 6 cups of coffee a month to support Ukraine in the war. Yeah, the 6 cups of coffee in the month is almost the amount of it for every European Union citizen. So it's nothing. It's just our comfort which we have to give up, but we are not ready to give it up, and therefore we want to go to the business as usual with Russia as soon as possible. You see, the sanctions are working only to a certain extent because there are always ways and companies who want to circumnavigate these sanctions. But from political side, we in the house in this house in Parliament, we need to make sure that we will not come to the business as usual, and we are fighting for that. We're talking to. I'm going tomorrow to Barcelona. It's very hot there. I'm going there just to talk about what is happening in Ukraine. That Russia is in charge. It's not Ukraine who started the war. And on the very end, I really hope that one day Russia will pay the compensation and help Ukraine to recover itself. I am delusional, I know, but I still have a hope. We do need to make sure that Russia is not returning to the table as long as this corrupt regime of Putin exists. But unfortunately, I guess there are other people thinking differently. But I do all the best from my side to do so. And with the European funds, I still think that the funds are needed where they are like-minded governments. And I have been myself in these wars, and my soldiers have lost their health and lives in Mali and in Central African Republic. But if the governments in this do not accept us as a democratic partners and like-minded nations, why should we pay money there? If Ukraine, who has defined itself like-minded, democracy-oriented country, is in need. So I think Europe needs to start to re-aim its finances to where it is worth of. That's my absolute conviction. Yeah, I don't know whether I answered the question.
Mr. Novalic, thank you.
Well, I would start from the last question. You know, from our experience, a whole approach to the Balkans in the post-war years was framed in something which is well known as transitional justice. And we actually refuse to be part of that process. We are very critical toward that framework, mainly because, as I explained, it does at some point understand that in 5 years you will go from point A to point B. And from the very beginning, we have seen that does not work in that way, you know. And we, in Center for Nonviolent Action, actually from 1997, we are advocating for approach which is defined as peace building approach. And main differences between this transitional justice and peace building approach is understanding that for some processes you will need years, generations, you know. And from the very beginning, we actually seek for support uh, from people for that type of process. It's not only about outside support, people who will support from outside that. It's more about local people, you know, because a lot of people in Bosnia have been disappointed, you know, because at one point, you know, they got message, you know, if you do that in 5 years, we will be there, and it doesn't happen. And after 5 years, after that disappointment, they are not willing to involve themselves in process again, you know. So you need to be honest with people. You need to explain them. You need to explain them that we cannot fix everything. We will try to do some symbolical things. You know, you cannot repair everything. If my grandma lost her child, we cannot repair that. And we need to be honest with people. We need to tell them what is possible and what is not possible. Regarding this remark, I would say there is different layers, you know. I also would not support Mali government, but I would support Mali people. I have some friends from Mali, some other parts of the world, they are not supporting that government, and we need to be we need to make distinction between people and government always, you know, no matter how difficult it is, we should do that, you know. And the second layer is, you know, business as usual, and I don't see that war is interrupting that. Business is going as usual despite the war. We have some sanctions, you know, they are interrupting business, but still business is smart enough to find way to deal with sanctions. There is this layer of ordinary people, and I could also say from my personal experience that I wouldn't think that I would ever visit Serbia in 1995 or 1996, 1997, you know. I perceived back then Serbia as aggressor who killed some my relatives. My father participated in that war against Serbs, you know. But on that level of everyday life, I'm glad that today, 30 years after everything, I could be, you know, on the same beach with people from Serbia, and that we can understand each other, you know. I'm still not happy with Serbian government, especially this one, which is currently in power, you know. And I know that some people would oppose to peace, you know, from that side. But 30 years after Dayton Peace Agreement, I know that many people actually want to live just normal life, you know. They do not want to make harm to me or my family in any way. And I'm trying to actually make connections with them and trying to do something jointly to prevent any future conflict.
Thank you. Okay, I was plan was to give Jan the final word. Maybe Jan kind of the final message. So if you want to, pass to us as we continue here. But Tim had, we will not start a new discussion, but maybe you have a comment there.
I'll keep it very brief if I may. I just wanted to thank you for mentioning the Invictus Games and also the Royal British Legion and the Poppies. I just wanted to make a point that this is also relevant to all of our countries, not just Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine is extremely important because if you look at Britain, we have 1,850,000 veterans, of which 250,000 are women. A third are over 80 years old, but that shows how embedded the philosophy, the approach, and politically also the sensitivity of looking after veterans has become in Britain. And that leads me to two specific questions, because as we rebuild the European concept of an army, of a reintegrated security dimension, we also have a recruitment challenge. And I think looking after the veterans is also one way of recruiting new people. So a very specific question to do with the Security and Defence Committee. Have you actually done, or are you thinking of doing a hearing that will look at the issue of veterans in the round? And if so, if I could appeal to you also then not to ignore nations that made a mistake 10 years ago by leaving, but look at also the British example, and as Tona mentioned, the American example, because the veterans issues there I think are worth looking at, given the scale of veterans and the scale of the military in our societies. And second question, has the EU done something similar to what the British government has just done, which starts actually today, which is giving 1.5 million to the Ukraine government, handled out of our embassy in Kiev, to the Ministry of Veteran Affairs, specifically to discuss and help planning issues that have been discussed today. And thank you again for this discussion.
Yep. Yeah, we are a bit running out of time. I don't know if there would be. We can, either you can answer that, or we can have a, continue this discussion in other conferences.
I can respond quickly. SEDA is so new committee that we are dealing right now with fighting what is our responsibility or what is not, and the veterans issues has not been discussed, but I have it in my agenda at least to bring it up to the topic. The responsibility of defense lies by the nations. So European Union can only advise and do things, but certain things are not in our scope. And therefore, perhaps it is waste of time to do it in the parliament, which we do mostly, waste of time, and for focus in the countries to find like-minded nations to do something together. And Invictus is one of these kind of type of things to do. I think that would help better. No, the veterans issue has not yet got any attention from that terms that they are. And that I mentioned it, that we need to start to think about possible Marshall Fund type organization for Ukraine. Yeah.
Thank you. Jan, any final message before we close this start of the discussion?
And again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be part of this meeting and talk about the problematic questions of the veterans in Ukraine and their future. Also would like to say that we all should understand and remember that Ukraine right now is standing not only for the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian land, we're standing for the whole civilized world. If Ukraine will fall, other countries are going to collapse one after another, when the Russian aggression is going to continue moving forward. And they're going to use us as their new power, as their new soldiers on the front line.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Yeah, Slava Ukraini. I think it is a great conclusion, a good conclusion for this discussion, because as I said, this is only the beginning of the first discussion in process about this topic. We will return to that. Jan, if you would be here, I would invite you for lunch, as the rest of it, but with that we have to keep for the next time. Best regards to you and to your wife and to your child, and then looking forward to seeing you in Brussels next time.
Thank you.
Bye bye. And yes, as said,
Thank you.
you know, we would like to welcome you for lunch. And thank you for everyone coming and, you know, full house. And of course, Jan, you know, making the effort. There was a big attempt to come here, and of course the panelists. So thank you so very much. Bye.